All right. Today, well, actually yesterday, the president, in his presidential commission on the Supreme Court, held its second meeting in what is to be a series of 6 meetings to hear from expert witnesses and to discuss a broad range of reform proposals, including the expansion of the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Now, they're also looking at the establishment of term limits and the reduction of the court's power of judicial review. The 36-member commission was formed by President Biden back in April, in charge with producing a report analyzing the, quote, principal arguments in the contemporary public debate for and against Supreme Court reform, end quote. But many believe that the end game for this effort is to add more seats to the court, as proposed, by the way, by House Democrats in a bill that was introduced less than a week after the commission's formation. Now, court packing dominated yesterday's hearing, and rightfully so. It was also at the center of a letter sent to President Biden on Tuesday by a group of 20 Republican governors who made very clear to the president that any recommendation to expand the court should be rejected outright. Joining me to talk about this and more is one of those governors, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Governor, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to be back with you, Tony. Thank you.
Well, Governor, I want to get to also that Supreme Court decision, which I think affects you today in terms of election integrity. But first, reading just the first line of this letter you sent to the president, as governors, we oppose any attempt to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court of the United States. In short, court packing or increasing the number of justices to manipulate the court's decisions would be unprecedented, unproductive, and unpredictable. Any response from the president thus far?
Not that I've seen. Of course, he hasn't responded too much to really a lot of the political moves that they're making up there in the Biden White House, the Biden administration, whether it's with, court packing, the dangerous, really even thought of that to manipulate the legislative process. That would be never ending if they ever did that, depending on which party was in control. I don't think anybody that's reasonable thinks that's a good idea. But they also haven't really responded to the Elections Integrity Act that we passed and, the ridiculous lawsuit that his Justice Department has filed against us when they couldn't get H.R. 1 or S.1 passed. That was an unconstitutional power grab of elections at the federal level.
We had your Attorney General on earlier in the week discussing that lawsuit that has been filed against you. But I would think that the news coming out of the court today, in which the court, and I'm going to get into this in more detail later, folks, with J. Christian Adams, but the court essentially upholding Arizona's law that had to do with ballot harvesting. And as I appreciate it, it deals with the same section of law which I think the DOJ has come after you on.
No, exactly. I think it's a very strong ruling. I know Christian can go through the legal weeds of that probably more so than I have. I haven't been able to read the ruling yet, but I got a quick briefing earlier today on it, and I think it's great for not allowing ballot harvesting. It also is going to make sure that, in Arizona, which is the same in Georgia, that people have to vote in the precinct where they live. You can't just go to any precinct anywhere and demand a ballot. That creates a lot of problems for the election workers and the integrity of the election. And we addressed that in our recent law. And those are all good signs that the justices, I think, approve of the state making up their election laws. And I think both Arizona and Georgia and a lot of other states have gone through a really meticulous process to do that. With the bill that we had recently in Georgia, and that's nothing new, Tony. We've done that, for years, decades in Georgia. We did that. We had housekeeping election legislations after a lot of big elections. When I was Secretary of State for 9 years, we certainly did it again this year after we, had some issues with really the mechanical issues of the vote here in Georgia because of COVID protocols and just dealing with the pandemic. And anytime you have changes, we had change in voting equipment, you find out things that you need to address. And I think the General Assembly did a good job of really doing a lot of due diligence to address those, talking to local elections workers in the process, our citizens, And obviously, as a former Secretary of State, I had some strong thoughts on what we needed to do. I've always run on secure, accessible, fair elections in Georgia and making sure it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And that's what our bill does. And I think most Georgians agree with that.
Well, and so do most Americans, by the way. They think
Correct.
that
That's
elections should be fair, and this is and I'm sure you hear it, but I hear it as I travel across the country. Anytime I get to a Q&A session with groups that I speak at, one of the things they ask is, how will we know that our vote counts? Because you know what, I just don't know if I should vote if my vote's not going to count. And what you did in Georgia and what 47 other states attempted to do, I think about 14 have actually been able to move bills forward, is critical in reassuring the American people that their vote will count.
Well, that's right. But you also, again, the political side of this with the Biden administration and Stacey Abrams and a lot of these activist groups, they called our legislation Jim Crow 2.0 because we were going to use a voter ID requirement on absentee ballots. Yet when Joe Manchin has that in the compromise bill at the federal level, they're okay supporting it. Nobody likes hypocrisy in politics. They just want people to be honest with them. Our bill, I've been honest with people. I've done, probably close to 90 interviews now talking about the details of our bill, answering every question that's out there. And you don't see the other side doing that. They just give a sound bite saying this is suppression, this is Jim Crow, this is bad for minority voters. And that's just not true. Minority participation has increased in Georgia over the years, and Georgians realize that. And they support the voter ID requirement, and they support having secure elections. Even a vast majority of the Democrats want that. I mean, it's the American way.
Right, and I think this court case, I've not been able to dive deep into the actual opinion, but in skimming through it, it appears that it could help Georgia because rather than the opponents just be able to throw past, could be past factors on the wall, hoping they stick to prove that you have bad intent, they have to prove that this law would in fact affect the outcome of participation, which is a higher standard.
Well, we feel good from what we know about it. I mean, we'll certainly see how this shakes out the next several days. But regardless, it's Arizona, and my focus is on Georgia and defending our bill. And I know the Attorney General and our team of lawyers is ready to do that, and very confident in the steps that the General Assembly took. And I'm confident, and that's why I signed that bill, and we'll see them in court.
Well, and I hope you prevail because it will benefit states all across the nation. One final question for you, Governor, back on the issue of the Supreme Court, because obviously a lot of what the states do ends up in court, and the courts have become a real problem. I know this from my past as a state legislator, having the courts overturning and doing all that they do to trip up the states. Will the governors be invited to testify before this commission that the president's created?
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't think we would, but we'll see. I know certainly there would be a lot of good ones that could really speak to this and, just convince them that this is a terrible idea. And, it's really pretty surprising to me that President Biden, who talked on this, first day in office of uniting the country, continues to do things like this, filing lawsuits against election integrity acts and, not securing the border, raising taxes, adding more regulations. I don't think that's uniting the country at all. In fact, I think it's further dividing it. But, that's what we have to continue to do is talk about the issues and talk as Republicans as to what we're for and what we want to do. And that's what I plan on doing over the next couple of years in my reelection campaign.
Well, Governor, I appreciate you joining us today. And again, I do appreciate your leadership on this election integrity effort and for staying there, standing strong, and not backing down as the left has thrown just about everything they could at you.
Well, we're going to keep fighting, Tony. Thanks for having me on, and God bless.
All right. Have a great 4th of July weekend.